First of all, I would like to congratulate Pakistan-American Congress for making a special effort to host this important program. And very happy to see a very distinguished panel here, and also like to commend the audience who has made a particular investment to come here and listen. Somebody was telling me before I came that I should speak from the heart. I will try to do that. There are some pieces of puzzle. I'll try to form a single picture. I think there was a conference on terrorism, and I don't know how you pronounce his name. PAPE, University of Chicago. How do you pronounce it? PAPE. Sometimes PAPE. Okay. And his conclusion was very simple, that the root cause of most of terrorism is occupation. That was the conclusion of the University of Chicago project, you know. But I will add a few things to it. I think we have to also worry about the terror of the tongue, which is now infesting the American landscape. Deliberate, malicious attempts to humiliate and to insult. And this is not just an issue of radicals. I want to make it very clear. I just came from Pakistan, and this issue has outraged different segments of Pakistani society, and it has cast America and the West in a very negative pall, because constant attempts to humiliate, to insult, and even at the mainstream level, you see even from the Republican right politicians, constant the pejorative use of the word Islam and linking it with terrorism and other negative behavior. And I don't know whether one of the guys involved in the shooting was Nader Sufi, reputed to be Pakistani. You know, his mother is a white Caucasian Roman Catholic nurse. I heard her interview, she was crying. So we should be very careful about this ugliness of hate speech. And when I came to this country, I was told not to discuss religion and politics, not to hurt people, be sensitive. But this is now, I think all bets are off. And this is having a very dangerous repercussions on the world stability. So be extremely careful of that. I made a special effort to visit Albania and Kosovo. Mother Teresa, I admired her. I met her many years ago. Great lady, tremendous lady. And Albania is a remarkable country. It's just emerged out of the post-communist draconian rule of Anwar Hoxha. And amazingly, I saw in Albania, and also went to Kosovo, that Americans are extremely popular in Albania. So much so that outside, about 14 miles outside Tirana, and this is a Muslim majority country, by the way, Muslim majority and Christian community, and they're living in complete amity. There's a statue of George Bush, and 70–80% people revere America. When I went to Kosovo, I saw a statue of Clinton, because their actions of American actions were consistent with their values. They supported the struggle of the Albanians, the Kosovars, against atrocities, and they supported post-communist Albania to enter the NATO, and now making efforts to support their entry into the European Union. So there's tremendous popularity. So actions do make a tremendous difference. So it can create liking, it can also create disliking. I was in the cabinet in Pakistan for 5 years, and I made special efforts in my own capacity. I was also advisor to the Prime Minister, and special efforts to participate in Christmas events, participate in Easter events, and we used to illuminate the Muslim League House on Christmas days. Even we used to have Diwali celebrations. It was unthinkable for any mainstream Pakistani politicians to cast aspersions or hate any other religion. So it was almost something unthinkable. I just want to mention that. Coming on terrorism, I think there's a problem in the definition of terrorism. There's a one-sided view of terror. Group terror, individual terror, but no reference at all to state terror. You cannot have a discussion on terrorism while focusing purely on individuals, purely on groups, and excluding the apparatus of state terror. And ask the people in Syria, or in Libya, or in Iraq, or in Palestinian territories, or elsewhere in the world who have suffered. Look at the impact on them. And I met, a few years ago, I met General McChrystal, a very intelligent man, very competent general. I wish he was still there. And I made this point. I said that instead of constantly fighting wars, why don't you do two things? The biggest source which roils global tension is the Palestinian issue. try to attack the issue and try to handle it, resolve it. And regionally, the biggest source which fuels militancy is the Kashmir issue. Try to handle it. And I just want to mention one thing, that the Organization of Islamic Conference was formed just because of the Palestine issue in 1969 by Faisal. In 1973, Faisal was a great ally of the United States. I was doing my LLM in America, law studies, and he imposed an oil embargo, not because of any bilateral issues, bilateral tensions between Saudi Arabia and America because of the Palestine issue. It was Faisal who conceived, envisioned the concept of the Islamic Summit, the greatest ever gathering in my home city, Lahore. And there, if you look at the resolutions, 90% of the resolutions were driven by the Palestinian cause. So that has to be very, very important, that this approach now of body count, we have killed so many. I heard this talk by this guy, Marco Rubio, who is now considered a budding star, and he said he's going to handle issues. He was quoting a line from the movie Taken, and that Liam Neeson, in which, by the way, the villains are, I think, Albanians in that, Albanian mafia, that we should look for them. We should look for them. We should look for them and capture them and kill them, you know. So this attitude of body count has failed already in Vietnam. Westmoreland had this approach, and America is now commemorating, I think, the 40th anniversary of the debacle of Vietnam. Those who want to get more educated, see the excellent movie by Rory Kennedy, a niece of President Kennedy, on the last days of Vietnam. So leaving both the issues, the Palestinian issue and the Kashmir issue, unattended, I think is a very serious mistake. Now, talking of again on the issue of terrorism, for 10 years, Mr. Modi was barred from coming to America because there was actual evidence of his complicity in the massacres in Gujarat. But now when he came, he was lionized and feted and appreciated a lot. But remember one thing, that it's the State Department itself, and they had good basis to bar him for 10 years. And that basis should be made, I think, public. Another approach in basically American approach and Western approach is that let's cultivate the elites and forget about the street. You can't have it both ways. You can't hate the street and hate the elites. And I think this is a big conceptual mistake, that the so-called secular, liberal, moderate elites are going to foil militancy. In fact, their very venal conduct, their very misgovernance, their very lack of legitimacy is fueling militancy. And they are called moderate. There's no moderation in their pursuit of the big bucks. They may be moderates in political, maybe, but in terms of making tons of money, there's absolutely no moderation. So cultivating the elites at the expense of the streets is a serious mistake. It has not worked before. It's not worked now. I don't know. I think some people are Christians. I have a Muslim, devout Muslim family, but I went to a Catholic school, luckily. I got good teachers. I also went to FC College. I think what to do next? I think it's very important. One of the great stories, one of the great Christian stories, I think for me it's a universal story, is seeing light on the road to Damascus. I was taught by this by nuns, that St. Paul was Saul. He was sent to persecute Christians in Damascus, and he was struck by lightning, he was blinded, he was unhorsed, and when he saw Christ, and Christ asked him, why are you trying to persecute me? When he regained his sight, he realized he was on the wrong track. I think that's very, very important, to realize that the track one is following is the wrong track, and changing course. And even in America, you see some examples. I've given you the example of St. Paul. I went particularly to his church also in Damascus, the street called Straight. He's called Bolus there in Damascus. In America, you saw the example of Malcolm X, and he had this moment of epiphany. He went to Mecca, and he realized that the road of exclusion and separatism is a mistake. And he turned to mainstream Islam, and he made all the difference. And even now you see in America also that I think this American electorate in the post 9/11 era, nobody could have imagined that somebody with the name of Barack Hussein Obama would become the harbinger of hope, with somebody with a biological Muslim father and a stepfather who was also Loyola Sweater, who was of a Muslim background. So there has been goodness within America, and there has been attempts to rectify. We saw that in the election 2008, which was reaffirmed in 2012. So what are the choices? One choice is to persist on the same path. continue using force, continuing using the language of extreme and hate. By the way, the language of extreme and hate is universal. Whether you see it in Israel or in India or in Pakistan or the USA, there is no difference in the language of hate and extremism. Try that language. It's a road, well-traveled road. But you look at the results, disaster, agony, and lack of security and fear and paranoia. You see that in America, you see that in the rest of the world. That is one road. The second choice is changing the course. And I think this is a route I think Robert Frost had suggested in FC College, Foreman Christian College, where I was fortunate to be educated. By the way, it was set up by American missionaries in 1864.
Before University of Minneapolis.
Yes, and set up during the time of the Civil War. Lincoln died in 1865, the Civil War ended, and the motto was, by love, serve one another. Presbyterian Church had founded Foreman Christian College, by the way. Wow. And the motto was, by love, serve one another. And the second choice is the path of reconciliation, the path of cooperation, the path of shaking hands. And I think it was tried by de Klerk in South Africa. Give de Klerk a credit. He was one of the arch proponents of apartheid. He realized in 1990 that if South Africa has to survive, it has to do two things. Again, he had the moment of epiphany. That first of all, release Nelson Mandela and dismantle apartheid. He saved South Africa from bloodshed. And today, the South African cricket team's greatest batsman and their captain is an observant Muslim with a long beard, Hashim Amla. That's an example. These things are possible. Pope intervened on the issue of Cuba. From 1959, January 1st, when Castro took over, now there was a deadlock. But the Pope intervened and thaw took place, and he facilitated the rapport between America and Cuba. And this led, by the way, Raul Castro to say that I have changed my mind about Catholicism. I am going to become a Catholic. I am going to again go and pray. So that happens basically. So important thing I'm telling you, there are people also from the State Department, give people a reason to live. Enough reasons have been given for people to die. Give them reasons to live. Remove this element of exclusion and humiliation. Give them a sense of inclusion. If you go, I don't know how many, Lisa, whether you have gone to the European Cemetery on Jail Road in Lahore. Have you been there?
Yeah.
No, you must go there because many Americans lie buried there in the 19th century. Gora Kabristan. And in most of them, the epitaph written on this tombstone is very important. That it's amazing. Of St. Paul's last, dictum, that I fought the good fight, I stayed the course, and I kept the faith. That is why I expect that, please, for the civil society to step up. Don't expect politicians to bring change. They are wedded to their own agendas. They are wedded to their own heavy investors. And those who are here know about the impact of Citizens United on the American electorate. Billionaires in the capacity to buy elections. So civil society has to step up and see the light and make a difference. And I think that if there's a change of course, I see tremendous hope in this world. And by the way, remember one thing, labels also. When you talk of terrorism, don't forget the terror of gun violence. It's not, the terror word is not used. You saw terrorism in the Batman episode in Colorado. You saw terrorism in Sandy Hook. You saw rampant terrorism in shootings in the schools. And people talk of the Texas shooting. I am reminded of another Texas shooting. Texas Tower shootings of August 1, 1966, when Charles Whitman went to the University of Austin and killed about 16 students. So I think that I will end with one thing that Confucius said. If you point a finger at somebody, remember that 3 fingers are pointing at yourself. We all need to self-examine. We all need to self-evaluate. And we all need to seek the path of self-discovery and self-correction. Inshallah, I will expect to see the return to the old amity and friendship and goodwill between Muslim world and the West. Thank you very much.